I'm Stephen Yip, and this is my wife Jackai Yip, and we're here to tell our story.
Yeah, our first birth story. There was something in me that said, like, why don't I just look online and find out what other methods or philosophies about birth there are? And that's how I ended up finding your class. And so I told Stephen about it, and I was a little apprehensive because, working in the medical field, it's just such a foreign kind of concept for us. But there was just something in me that was like, if I want to give our baby the best chance of coming into this world just in a more peaceful setting, I imagined I should give it a try. I had read the statistics, on how many women go through and have a natural birth, and that was really what drew me in.
And it was definitely something that I had never heard about, and so there was a lot of questions that I had, but I definitely wanted to be a part of the labor as much as possible. And the other classes didn't seem like there was so much involvement for the partner to be active and supportive. Yeah. And so that part of it really intrigued me.
So starting with our labor story, it was not the textbook story. Our due date was about 5 days away. So we come home and I take a shower, we're getting ready for bed, and then my water breaks. And so I was very excited. I remember the moment when I felt the water coming out and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is happening. I think my water just broke. And Steve is like, what is it? What is it like? What does it smell like? Because, it was just some different. And so I remember smelling on a piece of paper and I was like, it smells like a baby. And that was the thing that I remember. It was like the best scent ever, like a new baby smell. So I remember we were really excited. That was like the first stage for us, just being so excited that things were starting. We took a picture in the bathroom. Thankfully, Stephen had set up kind of everything that we would need for labor. So since I wasn't having any contractions at the time, we were like, okay, I guess we should just go to bed like we were planning to do. So we went to sleep. And the next morning is when I felt the first tinge of a contraction. It was just like my stomach tightening and then it would release. And it was like once every 15, 20 minutes. So I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling contractions because I didn't know what they would feel like.
Yeah. And it woke you up though.
It did wake me up, but I could go back to sleep.
We probably went to sleep at 11 or 11:30.
And then 5 or something.
Yeah, and then you woke me up at it was probably 4:30 or 5.
Yeah, the first few, I didn't really think about them. And then I remembered, okay, well, we've learned all these techniques. I should get you up and we should try something.
Mm-hmm. But you felt like you could handle them.
Yeah, I was handling them great.
And then you felt like you couldn't anymore, and that's when you wanted me to coach you.
Yeah, and I think they were still how many minutes apart?
Early on, they were probably around 7 to 8 minutes when you woke me up apart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So once I got to that phase, I think that's when I was serious. I was like, okay, this is not something that I can just kind of deal with anymore. I should wake him up. I kind of felt bad about waking you up, but then I'm like, I need your help. Yeah. So at that point we did, you were coaching me with the breathing and the body relaxation.
Yeah. We did the side lying and we did a lot of coaching around breathing and relaxing from head to toe. Those were the two primary ways that we dealt with it early on, with the contractions early on. And a lot of visualization of the bag of muscles working.
Yeah, I really liked that. That was helpful because that's when I actually could relate the sensation I was feeling with that flexing. And it really did feel like that. It felt like, yeah, it just felt like a muscle just flexing. And so we continued to do that for a few hours, and we were serious. I know we were both serious, but I was like, oh, we're progressing, things are moving, because he would tell me, now it's been this long, your contraction is about 45 seconds. So I knew that we had made some progress.
During that time, the sun had come up, and we were like, oh, let's go try to go to the living room and see if we can do some contractions out there. And it was like during that move that things started to slow down, and we're like, what's going on? Was this because of what we did, or?
Then what occurred was the contractions just completely stopped.
Yeah, they started to
It was like
spread out.
I would have a contraction, he says every 7, 8 minutes.
And then it got down to like 5, 6 minutes.
Oh, it did? Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then it was back to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
We had no idea. It was probably like an hour or so of us just being confused. Like, what's happening? Why is it slowing down? What does this mean? Is something going on with the baby, or, and so we contacted our midwives.
We contacted them earlier on in the morning to let them know.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, like, hey, Jackai's water broke last night.
Yeah, that's true.
Then we went to sleep with no contractions going on, nothing was happening, and we're waiting.
And then exactly around the same time the next morning, it was like deja vu. Everything just started again. So the contractions picked up. I remember handling the first sets, and I was like, okay, I felt this before. I can do this. And it was just kind of a light kind of, tension. And then after, when I felt like I couldn't really handle it with just breathing on my own anymore, I remember nudging you, and I'm like, okay, I think this is it.
Yeah, and it was quick too. So once things picked back up, it was only within like a half hour to an hour that the contractions were so strong that you felt like you wanted me to coach you again. Okay. Which was different than the night before, because I think you went like a while on your own before you woke me up.
I remember thinking in my head, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm-hmm. But that was, I think you did feel that way, but it was actually like, I think things started again at around 1 or 2 in the morning, and then we actually called Susan to have her listen in on some of the contractions to see how things were, and because I think both of us were, or at least I was confused as to where we were at, like, because things had gone from no contractions to things being really serious so quickly.
I would cue you on the contraction, and you did a good job of telling me, like, this is your time to rest. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember even the rest. Like, I just remember it coming again. I felt like it was just wave after wave. Yeah. And you started doing the floating technique.
Yeah.
And that really helped me, because I was, kind of lost in waves.
So when the contractions started, she was like right back into the serious phase, and the contractions were coming pretty quick at that point. They were like every 6 to 7 minutes, but lasting about a minute each. And then some of them were doubles, and I think that was also confusing for me. We called our midwife, and our midwife came over probably around 5 or so, I think.
Actually, what I remember is that she came, and I was still in the side laying position because that worked the best for me. And she really didn't know that I was in labor. Like, she thought I was just resting. She said I looked like I was asleep. Yeah. And I thought that was so funny when he told me that later, because I'm like, I was really working during that period. Yeah, you were. I was working really hard. And so that was the funniest thing, because to her, it just looked like I was sleeping.
Yeah. Which is really incredible.
But things were happening rapidly. I remember it going to the point where I did think in my head, like, oh my gosh, I understand why I would want an epidural right now. This is a lot of pressure. And that's when I really felt a lot of like rectal pressure.
Well, and the contraction. So we went from the sideline position. You just felt so uncomfortable with it that we
Yeah, I
eventually.
remember I couldn't really keep my legs relaxed.
Yeah.
Like you kept telling me like just let everything melt, and I was like, I can't do this. So we changed positions at that period. I went into pelvic rocking, and that was helpful. And then I sat on the toilet because I thought I had to use the bathroom because I felt so much pressure down there.
And at that point, the contractions were like every 3 minutes, and they were lasting sometimes up to like a minute and a half, 2 minutes at a time. And they were just full force. And she would get like maybe 30 to 60 seconds of a break, and then another one would come. And at that point, it was like, I knew she wasn't there anymore. She was in a different land. Like when I'd seen other women go through natural labor, they could just kind of go into, I don't know.
What I felt like was I was kind of just floating, and I would have moments of consciousness. I was awake the entire time, but in my body, I just felt like, there's nothing I can really do at this point, but just let it happen. And so I do remember his voice though. I do remember that. And I was kind of going off of cues when he would say, we're at the peak. And then I would get a sense of relief, like, okay. And then, I'd kind of go back to that place.
Yeah. And it was easy to see. Because when the contractions started to get longer, it got a little bit worrisome to me that maybe I wasn't getting a cue that it had ended. But she always did a good job of letting me know when it ended. But at that point, she was definitely working really hard to try her best to relax. And like, I just remember the image of like your hands like grabbing onto things, and like your legs like clenching down, or like your face grimacing, and I would just try my best to get you to relax those places.
Before I ever said anything, I remember feeling my body like have an urge to bear down. And I remember I was on the toilet, and then I went back into the pelvic rocking, and that was the first time I even thought the idea, like maybe this is what this means, I'm supposed to be pushing. And it actually felt really relieving. So I told him, I said, I think we're ready to push. And then the midwife is like, wait, no, you guys aren't even close to that.
Well,
Because remember we said we're going to go on the bed and we're going to do 2 pushes.
Well, what happened was we got you in the shower.
Oh,
so we got you in the shower, and we wanted to run hot water on you and massage your back to try to get some relief.
Yeah.
And the midwife was gone.
Oh, she was.
Yeah, okay. She was like outside doing something, and I was like, let's just try to push.
I had already been kind of bearing down a little bit. And so I do remember that. I do remember you saying, let's go to the bed.
Yeah. Well, we pushed in the shower, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is so much better.
Oh, yes, we did.
Yeah.
We did.
And then we're like, okay, let's dry off. We'll go to the bed.
Yeah.
And then
that's when she came in.
Well, we got into the pushing position, like the first few pushing positions, and she walked back in the room.
She's like, what is going on?
We were starting to push, and she was like, what are you guys doing? But like in my head, I knew there was no way we're gonna have a baby anytime soon. So I felt really comfortable.
But you also knew where I was, because he had been watching the entire time, and she didn't really understand the emotional signs. So to her, she probably thought it was just like so bizarre that we're setting up and pushing.
There's never been an exam to know. She had no clue of how far along the dilation had gone. And so in her mind, she probably thought we were maybe like 4 centimeters or something.
I was so happy though, because I felt like, I felt my body, what it was doing. And then for him to know, not feeling what I was feeling, but just seeing me. Like we both were on the same page.
Yeah, and just trusting.
That was great.
Trusting everything that we had learned in the class to really guide us in knowing where we were at in the process.
And once we pushed, that is when I knew, okay, we have gotten to this step. Pushing is the way to go, because the time when I wasn't pushing, it felt so much more painful. it was almost unbearable. Like it just felt like I can't do this. But when I was pushing, I really felt like, okay, the pain has just subsided like by 50%. It was amazing.
The car had already been packed because the previous night we were thinking that maybe, or the previous day we were thinking that we would have to go to the birthing center. So the car was ready.
This is the time when, so I'm walking down the hall. It felt like the longest walk ever. And I remember stopping at our front door and getting on my hands and knees because a contraction was coming.
Yeah.
And I could feel this sensation of like the baby's head pushing through my pelvis. Like that, you know, the image you told us of the turtleneck kind of like just coming over. That is what I imagined. And then, you know, I remember you instructing me, like, don't push too much because we got to get to the birthing center. So in the car, I would push a little bit because the relief I felt pushing. So it was just a little bit, you know, but I wasn't trying to push the baby down and out just to have less pain during the contraction. I would push a little bit. And so we finally get to the birthing center, and the midwives are relieved because they didn't think we were going to make it.
Yeah, because it had been at least 45 minutes from when the midwife left us to us getting there because of the process.
And so when we got in there,
it was great because they had prepared everything. There was like a nice fire going in the room, and they had filled the bathtub for us, and it was all ready.
It was all ready. So I remember what happened when we got there was my midwife, she wanted to check me. And I was so hesitant because I'm like, we got this far. I'm already pushing. What's the point? And I told Steve, I'm like, I don't want her to check me. I really don't. I'd rather it just, you know, nothing go up there. Just have the baby come out.
Yeah.
But she was like, you know, I don't really know how far along you are.
Yeah, because at that
it would just be reassuring for me to know, is the baby, you know, are you fully dilated? What station are you? So I finally said yes.
Yeah.
After her asking me 3 times.
But it was because of the fact that she didn't look like she was in labor. And so it's really understandable that she would want to make sure that you were actually ready.
No, I know. And I know in my medical mind, I'm like, I get it. But I was just so ready, you know. I was like, what's the point? I know that I'm ready to have the baby.
It was funny, too, because I remember, like, one of the compromises that because I was like, oh, you know, we really don't need to check. Like, she's ready to just push. She was like, we just need to do it. We'll use a sterile glove, and I'll wash the glove with betadine before we check. And I was like, that's a lot of extra steps. Like, if you really need to, then that's okay. And so she checked, and the baby was like +1 or +2 station. So there was she barely did anything, just felt the baby. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're ready. you guys can push.
Yeah. And then I got in the birthing tub. And that was great. Just the warm water, it relieved so much tension in my back. And then the pushing stage, I guess emotionally I did feel excited because it was like I knew we had practiced on the bed at home, so I got the breathing down. And then once I was in the tub, just feeling more relaxed, it was like I really could feel how much pressure I was bearing down. And I was in the squat position, which was my favorite because I could feel the pressure of our baby's head, like every push. So that was reassuring because it was like, even though nobody could see anything yet, I could feel inside that the pressure was kind of going deeper and deeper and deeper, further and further down the canal. So that was awesome for me. And Steve did a great job coaching with the breathing and just making sure that I really took the 2 full breaths before I started to really push down, so we can make the most of each contraction. And the midwives, they were very great because they just kind of sat around silently. They didn't really get involved because they saw what a great job he was doing with the coaching. So I barely heard anything out of them. I think they just came over to really listen to the heartbeat, like every 3rd contraction or so. But I think it got more serious once we saw the little dime piece of the baby's head. And that's when I remember I guess time had progressed. I don't know how long I was pushing, but
It was like at least an hour and a half.
okay, so they were kind of like, saying, okay, you got to push down as much as you can. And I was just taking it in stride because it felt a lot better in the tub. And the squat for me, I mean, just feeling the pressure, it was really helpful. And towards the end, before the crowning started, I do remember the sensation of like a numbness. I remember you teaching us that you can have like numbness from the pressure of the baby's head, and I felt that. So it was actually kind of nice because some of the pain went away, and then the only thing that I really felt was the crowning, when his head was fully there, and that was burning. That was a burning sensation. Not comfortable, but I knew it was towards the end. So I didn't really feel too much self-doubt, but I remember kind of being like, oh, this is not comfortable. How long is this going to last type of thing. And then I think I was in that crowning stage for a whole contraction.
For longer than that.
Almost 2.
I think that we really slowed down.
You did tell me to stop pushing. I remember that.
So that you wouldn't have any
Yeah,
tears.
because I was terrified of having a tear. I didn't want to have a tear.
And so like that head was just hanging out there for a while.
Was it more than 2 contractions?
I think so. It was like at least 3.
Okay.
And the midwives, they would check the baby's heartbeat, and he was just doing great. So they felt really comfortable without forcing you to push him out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a strong little dude.
And so that burning sensation was there for a while because I had, stayed in that position for a while. But then once the head came out, it was like the work was over. His body just slipped out. And
it was cool because you were in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And the midwives put a mirror and a flashlight because it was pretty dark, so we could see the head rotate, and like you could see his forehead pop out,
and then his nose,
and then his nose came out, and then his mouth came out, and then when his like chest and stomach were coming out, you could see like the self-Heimlich, like so stuff came out, amniotic fluid or whatever it was came out, and then he just slipped out, and you caught him. I caught him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
cool. Then immediately they put him to my chest, and it was just like the best experience ever. We were both crying, but I just remember feeling so happy. And then he rooted a little bit, and we just laid there until the placenta came out 10 minutes later. And they also waited, and Steve cut the cord once it stopped pulsating, the umbilical cord. Yeah. So that was really good too. If we had our hospital experience, things would have turned out a lot differently, because just from our experience, we know there would have been a really high likelihood that I would eventually have been induced, and then probably had interventions, and that could have led to a C-section, and it could have been a totally different outcome. So I'm just so grateful that we had the support that we had.